Okay, here's a good one. Do you talk to your kids about leaving the church? And not in the sense that you try to talk them into leaving the church, but do you talk them about whether or not you ever worry about them leaving the church, or whether or not you ever worry about yourself leaving the church or people in general leaving the church? So my response is yes, we do talk to our kids and kids in general, teenagers, young adults, about leaving the church and what we think about people who leave the church. And leaving really just means you stop coming to church, not really referring to people who are actively attacking the church or something like that. But there's a few things that have made this conversation way different than in past generations. So, to start off, when I was growing up, it was obvious that my parents' generation, by and large, was terrified of their kids leaving the church. Like that was the worst thing anybody. Well, that's probably an exaggeration, but anyway, it was something that everybody feared. All the parents feared their kids leaving the church, and leaving the church was basically synonymous with all kinds of other stuff like experimenting with drugs, having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, failing high school, being a dropout, getting arrested, teenage pregnancy, like all these things were basically synonymous with leaving the church or, not living up to the standards or whatever. And I watched this generation, my parents' generation, in real time shift out of that when my parents' generation was like in their 40s, maybe up to their 50s, maybe. They were afraid of all of these things. And then in their 50s and into their 60s, they kind of realized, oh, it's going to be okay. I can't really do anything about this anyway. And I have to let my kids live their own lives. And it was kind of amazing because I remember talking to a few parents who had these crazy stories about their kids, where the kids would just vanish, for example, just drop off the map. Nobody knew where they were for months and months, and all of a sudden they show up in like a rehab facility or in jail or something. And talking to them, they would go through kind of this typical cycle of being worried, being terrified, being stressed out, not sleeping, not eating. This is the parents. And then suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, I can't live my life like this. Yes, I'm really worried about my son or daughter, but I have to live my life. I can't just stop living because I'm so worried. And so then they each seem to have this kind of moment where they surrender their son or daughter, give them to the Lord and say, I trust you. I don't know what the end's going to look like, but I know you're watching them and you care about them as much as I do. So I'm going to wake up in the morning and pursue the life that I want. And some of the children, well, I would say in large part, the kids kind of grew out of whatever phase it was. Some of them came back to church, some of them didn't. Some of them had wake up calls, like a drug overdose, or they fell in love with somebody that really helped them get on the right track or whatever it was. But there's lots of different things. So that was my parents' generation, and I saw that, and I knew that I was not going to be the parent that was hyper obsessed with my kids going to church on Sunday. Like that wasn't something I was super interested in measuring as, a metric of success. I really wanted to have my kids enjoy the gospel, but I didn't want to force it on them if it's something that they weren't interested in. And I saw my job being to help my kids be interested in celestial things. So, fast forward to modern day, it's a lot easier. If you're in the right circles, it's a lot easier to help your kids find interest in the gospel, but also just talk to them about leaving the gospel, leaving church, not participating. One huge tool, if you're like struggling or curious about this, is the Comeback podcast, which I'm sure everybody's in tune with. But if you listen to that podcast enough times, like it only takes a few times, maybe three, and you realize that there's this kind of pattern where people are living somebody else's life, like a son is trying to measure up to the standards of his parents and make his parents happy, and then he decides, screw this, I'm going to live my own life, heck with my parents. So he lives his own life, and in doing so, the parents are like, oh no, my son is lost, this crazy bad situation. In the meantime, the son is finding his own life and eventually decides that he doesn't like, tossing his life into the wind, and so he comes back to some kind of structure, whether it's the church or just, a family structure or just having a steady job or whatever it is. And the parents are like, yeah. So that's a common thread in the comeback podcast, and there's also the parents that have the common thread of surrendering these worries to the Lord. So the point is, we listen to those podcasts as a family, and we talk about them with our kids, and our kids see that pattern, and they find it super interesting. And along with a lot of other podcasts and stuff like that, but that podcast in particular is a pretty easy method to introduce the topic and just kind of power through it, because you get to hear stories of people who have been there. And so after not very long, it turned into a conversation with my kids where I would tell them, like, yeah, like if you guys decided that you didn't want to be a part of the church, it's okay. Like, it's not a big deal. You're still welcome in our home as long as you're a decent person, and we still love you. That doesn't change. But if you ever decide to leave the church, that's not equivalent to leaving the family or anything like that. Because I trust that you, as a good person, you want to be a good person. You don't want to hate God, for example. And even if you do get to that point, you're free to live your life. And I trust that you eventually will come around to a place of, maybe we'll call it peace with religion and with God, whatever it is. And you'll always have a place in our family as long as you're a decent person. And so that's been super interesting. I wonder what that would have meant to me and my family growing up. I don't know that it would have made a big difference in my life, but I know several, my siblings and my friends and stuff, it would have made a big difference to them, because there was something that seemed to happen pretty regularly, which was the kid, in high school would make a mistake, whatever, word of wisdom, law of chastity, gets caught cheating on a test, gets arrested, whatever. And that would kind of be the reason why the child would just head over heels dive into this pool of shame and self-destruction. Like, oh, now that I've done this thing, there's no hope for me, and I'm such an embarrassment. And so now I might as well just toss my life to the wind. And I think it would have really helped those people understand not only the gospel and repentance, but just like a father-son relationship, a parent-child relationship, where you can honestly say, like, I'm not here to force my expectations on you. I'm here to invite you to enjoy the gospel. And if you can say that that's not your thing and you want to do something else, that's fine. That's fine. It's not a big deal. So curious what you guys' thoughts are. I also just got an internet upgrade, so I'm able to do more like collaboration stuff. So if anybody wants to come on and talk about something, email me. All right, see you.